Welcome everyone to our Prisons to Partnership community gathering. Um, I'm Robert Thomas. I'm the co-chair for the planning of our national conference. It's coming up the weekend before um, Thanksgiving. Times to be determined, but just to make some quick announcements. Uh, we are looking for folks to join our board. So please go to our website and subscribe to our notifications and newsletters if you're not already, and you'll get notified of the information when we're ready to post that. But we are looking for president and vice president and a few other board and officer positions. So that note that's there. We are recording the call for those that can't be on, or if you don't want to be recorded, you can turn off your camera and rename yourself, or drop off now and then listen to the recording if that's an issue for you. And let's see. Other than that, I think I will turn it over to Tracy to introduce our speaker of the month.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm sure we're going to have more people join. So I met Brandon maybe 2 months ago at Mass Lib. And I was also on a Zoom with Brandon last Tuesday when he led the Compassion Prison Project Trauma Talks curriculum. It's a 16-week program, and he is leading 16 weeks online, which is amazing. I know he does that often. He goes into different prisons and leads the trauma talks. So Brandon is a journalist, a motivational speaker, and a youth mentor. And I know you've written a bunch of articles for the Prison Journalism Project. Read a couple of them, really beautiful. He has received AA degrees in Communication and Sociology, and he's currently enrolled at Cal State LA pursuing his BA in Communications. He was incarcerated at the age of 18 and sentenced to life. And after 25 years, he was released just recently, November, I believe he said. And he now lives a life of service and purpose. He is a trauma talks facilitator and InsideCoordinator for the 64 Days of Nonviolence campaign with Compassion Prison Project. And I'm gonna thank you so much for being here, Brandon. You are on.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me. I'm really honored. This is just a blessing to be here and to build community, because that's really what it's all about. Just throughout my incarceration, there was times where I just really felt disconnected from humanity and ultimately disconnected from myself. So anytime I get to be in spaces like this, it really it brings about more healing, because healing is progressive. So it just pours into my spirit. So I'm just thankful to be here. I plan on being transparent and vulnerable. Whatever questions you have that you're seeking answers to, I'm here to give them. So yeah, I'll open it up with that.
You want to give us, there's a friend behind you too.
Yeah, this is Chris, formerly incarcerated as well. Say
Hello,
hi, Chris.
Welcome. Welcome. Do you want to give us
I drop by and say hi.
Good.
Yeah, so do you want to give us, your story? Want to,
Okay. Yeah, so I grew up, I'm originally from West Covina, California. And just growing up, obviously there was a lot of trauma that was involved. If people are familiar with the adverse childhood experiences, the ACE quiz, I have 10 out of 10. So therefore, that just equates to a lot of trauma I've experienced, emotional trauma, physical trauma, sexual trauma, just abuse of all kinds. And I would say probably the most devastating thing I experienced was witnessing my first murder at the age of 6. And so it was like just that right there, that just equated to, me feeling like I was alone, And so what happens is, as a child, when you experience that level of trauma, you start to develop that warped belief system that you're on your own. At least that was like my experience. Like I was felt unsafe, and ultimately I felt unloved and unwanted. My biological father left when I was 4. Between up into the 6th grade, I went through 7 different schools and 10 different addresses. Um, then I remember my mother kicked me out the house when I was 15. I experienced homelessness, sleeping on park benches, bus stops, stealing cars just to fall asleep inside the backyard, and also just juvenile incarceration. That's a whole nother entity that I really hope to bring to the forefront as well too. The juvenile incarceration system. And I actually wrote a story that was published in Prison Journalism Project called Juvenile Hell. And so for me, I went to juvenile hall. I was 14 years old, and it was supposed to be a scared straight program. I was there for 3 days, and I knew within that time that I was going to find myself in prison one day. Like I just knew it. And I remember I had a conversation with someone, and they asked me about that. And I said, there's something that's called manifest destiny. And I believe the power of life and death is in the tongue. So you can speak words of life or words of death. And I remember every time I would get in trouble as a child, you know, my mother would always say is like, if you keep this up, you're going to be in prison one day. You keep doing this, you're going to be in prison one day. And then when I found myself in juvenile hall, it was just like, well, hell, this is where I belong, because this is what I was told all along. If I continue to do this, I'm going to be in prison one day. And so I just remember I spent 2 years and 8 months in juvenile incarceration, in and out of juvenile halls and camps, and it was just literally was just preparing me for prison. And because at that time I really felt like I was alone, like nobody cared, nothing mattered. The only people that was around was guys from my neighborhood. And so when you run into them in juvenile halls, there's automatically like that connection, you're trauma bonding, because the only people that understands your experience are those who are in there with you. And so when I came home, I really felt disconnected, like nobody really understood me. So obviously, to cope with that, I turned to drugs, alcohol, and just terrorizing the community that I profess to love so much. And so it's just really gaining that proper insight to understand like what happened, and first reconciling what happened within my mind and the narrative I painted for myself, but also to rectify the wrongs that I have done. And that's why I live a life of remorse. And a lot of things that I do, like to give back, is predicated on me actually understanding the harm that I've caused. And so, just full transparency to talk about my incarceration, I was arrested for the crime of home invasion robbery, which, I am guilty of. I did that. I've never professed to be innocent whatsoever. And so initially I was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And a lot of people, they don't understand, because they're like, was there a murder involved? And it was like, no, there was no murder. They sentenced me to life without the possibility of parole. Um, and initially on my appeal, they dropped it to 75 years to life. And so thankfully in 2016, they passed the bill SB 261, which made it possible as a youth offender for me to go to board. And that's why I'm right here, speaking to you all today. And I would just say that, like, I remember the judge when he sentenced me, he literally said, Brandon Jamal Baker, you're going to spend the rest of your natural life in prison. Do you understand what that means? And like slammed the gavel on me. And I just remember, just to paint the scene of like that courtroom and what that looked like. I have my grandmother, God bless her soul, she's passed away, and she was literally begging the judge, like in tears. And she came from Houston, Texas. My family, their direct lineage goes back to Houston, Texas, and Galveston, Texas. And we know the history of Juneteenth and what that city represents. And so to have my grandmother there in the courtroom begging the judge, for leniency, and so, and there was just no mercy to be found. It was just, Brandon Jamal Baker, you are now property of California Department of Corrections. So at that time, I was no longer even a human being. I was property. And so when I went back to the court tank, of course I had my chest out, my head up, like fist balled up, like I was ready for prison. But in actuality, what 18-year-old child, because even though society called me a grown man, I was very much a child. And just me being prideful and thinking that I had things figured out just shows the lack of maturity that I possessed. So, the society, what 18-year-old child is prepared to spend the rest of their life in prison? Nobody. I definitely wasn't. And then to make matters even worse, the first prison I was sent to was New Folsom, which is a level 4, 180 prison. And at this time in 2000, this was the most violent prison in the state of California. So now you're not even promoting any rehabilitation whatsoever, because first and foremost, the sentence didn't reflect anything dealing with rehabilitation. That sentence literally, LWOP, life without the possibility of parole, is only designed for punishment. It is not designed for rehabilitation whatsoever. And so to receive that sentence, and also to be placed at that environment where there was just violence running rapid, suicide was running rapid. That was probably the most alarming thing to me throughout my whole experience in prison, was the suicide rate. And that was something that definitely caught my attention, because I've also experienced attempting suicide on multiple occasions in my life. And I always say I don't like to go into details, for I don't know who's on this Zoom who is struggling with those tendencies, but I just always say that there's help out there available. And if you need the help, to seek the help. But I'm always transparent that I've actually attempted to take my life. And so when I would see people in there, it was always like a very intriguing escape, because once again, the years would go by, decades would go by, family members would die, childhood friends would die, and then you would just see there's no hope. So what's the point of me even living, just to see another day if I'm never getting out of here one day? So, that was something that I went through along that journey. And I would just say, because I don't want my story to be trauma saturated. I'm very, very cognitive of, like, a lot of times when we tell our stories, it's just the traumatic events. But for me, I also like to look at the beautiful aspect of my story and how it's kind of come back full circle, because when I was a kid, I had an imagination out of this world. Like, I always wanted to be a movie director. I always said I was going to be the next Steven Spielberg. Like, I just had imagination that was out of this world. And I remember the movie Peter Pan. I always tell this story. The movie Peter Pan. I love that movie because I experienced food insecurity. And I remember in the movie, they were eating imaginary food. And I just remember seeing that, and it just like literally blew my mind. And then I would literally, like, before I went to sleep, I would imagine like my favorite foods, and it would fill up my spirit, and I would be able to go to sleep, only to go to school the next day for a free lunch. And so, you know, my imagination, that's always been my superpower. And I still have it right now today. And I like to think that, my imagination is what's got me through some of the most darkest times of my life, because I've always been able to see a brighter future. One of my biggest regrets that I had was when I was 13 years old, I quit the drama club. And so Dr. Gabor Mate, who's like one of my favorite teachers, he's like one of my avatars. And in the film Wisdom of Trauma, which Fritzy was also involved in, he says that there's two things that are instrumental in a child's development, and they're like non-negotiable. He said it's attachment and authenticity. And he said if a child doesn't receive that attachment, they will suppress that authenticity in order to be attached. And that's really something that really resonates with me, because that was my reality. I was everything for everybody just in order to be connected to everybody. And so prison, it literally separated me from everybody. And so I would just say that, like, going back to the drama club, man, when I used to be on stage just performing, I didn't have a care in the world. I just believe in art, that it's expression. I love the dance, just everything, just all the movements, being intentional with my facial expression, hand postures, and everything. And then I remember, coming out of class, coming out of the theater, and people making fun of, what they called theater geeks and nerds and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I can't be one of those, you know, I can't be one of those, you know. And so I just remember I made the decision to quit. And even still into this day, like it really like breaks my heart because I think like, what if I would have stayed with that? You know, what if I would have remained my authentic self? You know, where would I have been? Like, you know, and so just a full circle moment right now. I also intern with Theater Workers Project, and I was a part of a film, The Walls, which we're actually premiering, we're screening at UCLA this weekend, this Saturday, and there's going to be an open panel discussion. So I'm excited for that, and it's just a beautiful thing just to have that full circle moment that like now I'm able to get on stage and express myself. And I always say that I'm going to be the first formerly incarcerated person to win the EGOT. So yes, I said that, I mean
Wow.
that, and that's the mission. So yeah, yeah. I see you have your hand up, Mark.
Brandon, I don't know if everyone knows what an EGOT is.
Oh, it's an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony, and emphasis on the T. So this is why I have to be on stage. So yeah, absolutely.
Brandon, I knew there was a connection when you first got on between us. So
Yeah.
I went to theater geek. I started in 9th grade doing theater, audio, and lighting. I made my profession to be a lighting and scenic designer and sound designer. I have 2 master's degrees from Yale, one in lighting design and one in scenic design. Cool.
Wow.
I have 2 Obies. I have 2 American Theater Ring Awards, and I spent 12 years on Phantom of the Opera as the sound and lighting guy, one of the sound and lighting guys. It is a wonderful way to make a living. It is a wonderful thing to do. If you ever have any questions or need any knowledge, feel free to reach out.
Absolutely.
I am a geek. I admit it. I love it. And everybody in the group here will tell you I'm a geek.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Me too. I love it. Because for me, I believe like me personally, I believe in the art of storytelling. And I always share with people is like that's how you're gonna connect. Because when you look at someone, you're only looking at the differences. Like, okay, you're black, you're white, or I'm Christian, you're Muslim, I'm short, tall, woman, man, and you're only looking at the differences. But when you hear a story, you're literally trying to grasp or gauge what you can receive from this person. No matter how they look, you're only looking at the storyline. And I always tell people, like, think about your favorite movie, whatever that movie was. You determined or you decided it was your favorite movie because of the character that you fell in love with. And I always share the story about Rocky. Like I said, I'm not Italian. Yeah. Hell, I've never been a boxer, never been to Philadelphia, you know, but I know what it's like to be an underdog. I know what it's like to get knocked down and have to get up. I know what it's like to have a mentor pour into me and then they're no longer here and I have to bring back to remembrance the lessons that they taught to me. I know what it's like to be in love with a girl and I think I'm cool with everybody else, but when she comes around, I'm just a nerd and awkward and stuff. So there's a lot of similarities within his story that I resonate with, and he's the people's champ. No matter who you are, you can relate to that story. And that's what I believe that's what's going to bring about the change in this world is like through the art of storytelling. So, yeah. Kent?
So, Brandon, I just want to welcome you. And I'm going to ask kind of a strange question.
Mm-hmm.
So P2P's mission statement is prisons to partnerships welcomes individuals and groups to share ideas and resources and make connections that foster a community committed to transforming the narrative around incarceration and reentry for individuals, families, and organizations. So given that, what would you say would be the most valuable thing that we could take on?
Yeah, that's actually not a strange question. That's a great question. And I would just say the most important thing is like really just to get involved, make yourself visible, make yourself seen. And I always tell people this, like, I don't know everything, I don't have everything, but within my circle of people, I can find an answer for you. So like, let's just say, for instance, if somebody comes to me and say, hey, I need reentry home. I don't have reentry home myself, but I'll say, hey, Jared Keefe from Testimony Ministries, that's my mentor right there. Hey, Jared, do you have any bed space for this person? Yes, I do. Bam. Okay, somebody says, man, I'm having mental health. I'm just really struggling out here in society. I don't know if a counselor or a psychiatrist will work for me. I used to love being in prison and being in those circles and in the groups. And I say, well, I don't run one of those groups, but hey, I know the prison way they do it. Matter of fact, they have a support class over there. I can plug you in with somebody over there. So it's really just about making yourself involved. So if you have an organization that you are a part of, you want to network with other organizations and let them know that, hey, this is what we do, this is what we have. If you need any help, or if you know anyone that needs any help, contact us, and vice versa. Whatever you're doing, hey, I'll take your card, I'll get your information. So if someone asks me, I can always refer them to you, because it's a more of a holistic approach when it comes to reentry. And then also, more importantly, just all the way down to the most minute, simplest detail that people don't understand or they kind of lose sight of, is go back inside the prison, right? Connect with people, show them that they're not forgotten about. That's why I love what Judy talked about, going back to Ironwood right now today with Fritzy and things like that, because that matters. Because when I was in prison, every time somebody that came in from the outside and talked to me and heard my story, and they let me know that, like, hey, they care about me, they see some humanity in me, that allowed me to see humanity in myself. Because like I said, I literally go back into the prison not because this is something that I just think is cool to do or anything like that. It's because I know how important it is for me to go back, because when I go back, I'm giving them hope. I always tell people, I can't give you faith, but I can give you hope. You know what I mean? Because faith is something that you have to wrestle within your own spirit, but hope is something that can be imparted in you from someone else. And also, just one more point why I would emphasize why this is important. And I shared this, I spoke at Pepperdine University last week, and just kind of making the connections. And they were asking me, like, what problems have I had, as far as reintegrating back into society. And honestly, like, I don't like to be prideful or big-headed, but I think that I've adapted pretty well because I was intentional when I was in prison. But I also speak with the voice of people who don't have a chance to speak. And one problem that I see is that people that get out of prison, some of them carry a lot of shame and guilt. Like, they don't want to say, hey, I'm formerly incarcerated, because when they say that, it automatically, they feel the shame. There's still trauma. They haven't really healed from that. And it's very real, because the prosecutors who speak with the voice of the people once upon a time said that you are unfit for society. Once upon a time, they said, we don't want you out here. You are sent to life without the possibility of parole, and you're going to die in prison. And also, when they go to board, most people, the prosecutors there at the parole board, re-emphasizing what they said 25 years ago, that, hey, you're still unfit for society. We don't want you out here. So now when we come home and we see the same people in society that the prosecutor once again professed that they don't want me out here, then I can't tell you that I'm formerly incarcerated, because you're going to judge me. Hey, you might call the police on me. I don't know. I'm re-traumatized. And so I think that that's something that people going back into prison and reassuring them that, hey, we want you out here in the community. We see your value. Yeah, we know that you did some horrible things in the past, and, we can reconcile that. We can heal from that. And once you're out, you can actually rectify that. You can right those wrongs, because it takes all of us to bring about that change. So, strange answer for a strange question.
Well, I I have to confess, I spent 4 years at Terminal Island, and
Yeah.
I'm still on supervised release. I'm just about to get off that. So
Oh man.
I
Yeah.
I have a relationship with you, knowing what goes on inside.
Man. Yeah.
And and I also have a wife of 40 some years who was traumatized by the whole thing. And
Man.
so I know how hard it is for families to uh, deal with the whole system of having someone incarcerated.
Yeah.
and I know I saw some pretty horrible things, and I was at
Mm,
I was at a low, so I could not imagine what it'd be like to be in a medium or a high security.
mm,
So my heart goes out to you for having been there and witnessed that and that. So um
mm.
that's part of why it's a lot of what has me be part of this group is because I really think that we really need to educate people about how inhumane the treatment is inside when you are convicted of a crime, and
Yeah,
it doesn't end when you get out, because there's still a word called felon, and
yeah,
people's perceptions of that and how they immediately judge and evaluate you. So that's part of why a lot of why I'm here is to, and I love hearing from people who've been inside. And the other question I always want to ask is, what was the worst thing? So, because only two other people that are part of the group have been incarcerated, so most of them don't have an idea of what's the worst thing that you've seen.
oh man, there's a long list of just the worst things that I've experienced in prison, but I would say death, and not even just necessarily, like not necessarily the act of death, like because I've seen people die from being stabbed, I've seen people die from overdose, from suicide, old age, cancer, like just all kinds of death. But I will speak about the intricate details that go into it. Like once upon a time, I had a cellie that moved in with me because his cellie had died. He had a heart murmur. He collapsed on the basketball court, and so his cellie moved in the cell with me. And during that time, he had to call this man's family and to tell everyone that what was going on, because the administration wasn't releasing any details. Nobody knew what was going on, so everything that the family was hearing was coming from him. And it was just like, it was just the strangest thing ever, and it was really like heartbreaking. And then that was like my biggest fear. Like my biggest fear was not dying, my biggest fear was dying in prison, because just seeing what goes into that, like, you know they didn't release any information. And finally, like 2 or 3 weeks later, when they finally did confirm to the family that, hey, your loved one is deceased now, you need to make arrangements of getting the body. And then the family had to do like a GoFundMe fundraiser to get some money to get the body back. I think they wanted like $20,000 or $30,000 just to get the body back. And so I was just like, it just blew my mind that like even in death, they still own you. And I would have to say that by far, like that was the worst experience I've seen in prison, just like people dying. That's why whenever I see on the news and I see someone deceased in prison, it breaks my heart, because I think about that struggle and like what that family is going to have to go through. And so like I tell you now, now that I'm free, it's like I don't worry about anything else. That was my biggest fear, was dying in prison. Seriously. Yeah.
And what about medical care?
So yeah, that's another thing. Like, I just think that the medical care, they put a lot of money into medical, obviously, but I could just only speak from my experience, and they just give you medication for everything. Like you go in there with this diagnosis, just here, take this medication. And then they'll force you to take the medication. And even if you're against it and you say, I don't need this medication, like I feel fine, they'll give you a 115. They'll write you up. They'll write
Oh,
you
a
up, which will
115
keep
is?
you, it's an infraction, it's a rule violation. So
Uh-huh.
basically they're gonna give you a write-up and punish you for not taking your medication. And I also believe in like also understanding now like about trauma-informed care, holistic approaches to things, and they're still behind on that. Like they haven't really caught up to that. So like one prime example, I remember I was in Calipatra, and this was like I was in my early 30s, like I was in the prime of my life. I was working out every day, drinking water. And I would go to medical and my blood pressure was just like through the roof. Like I would be like 190 over 110. And like the doctors would be like, well, what's wrong? Are you eating soups? Like, I mean, what's wrong with you? Like, I was like, no, I don't eat soups. I drink water, eat vegetables, all that stuff. And so, but never once did they ask me about my trauma. Never once did they ask me, was I triggered before coming to medical, before they took my blood pressure. They didn't ask me any of that stuff. But the trauma was very real. And so what I understood was, and Fritzy actually talks about this like in the videos in lesson 1 about her going to North Kern, the first prison she went to, and guys are dysregulated and there's just a lot of tension and you can cut the tension with a knife. And that's how it was for me when I was in Calipatra. Every time I left out that cell, it was like, this could be my last day. You know, there's tension everywhere. And so of course, you know, my heart is racing. Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, you know, she talks about that in her TED talk, you know, when she talks about, you know, if you're in the woods and you see a bear, you know, your heart is beating, your fists are balling up, and you're ready to go. And she was like, that's fine if you're in the forest and there's a bear. But what happens when that bear comes home every night? And so that was like my reality when I was in prison every day. Like, I mean, this could be my last day. So I'm hyper vigilant, you know, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, whatever I have to do to secure myself to see the next day. And so that's where my blood pressure came from. And so now that I'm home, I got, you know, the medical checks and everything. Man, my blood pressure was like 130 over 72. And it's like, you know, no medication or nothing. But really what it was that trauma, you know, hypertension was real.
And my last question would be food. What was the food like?
Oh man, horrible, indescribable, and yeah, it was just horrible. So I would say as far as like the state issue, and this is another reason why, you know, the jobs that we work in there, like in prison, they literally pay you 8 cents an hour. If you get that, some jobs they don't even pay you at all. Like if you're a porter or you're on yard crew or something like that, you're not getting paid anything. And then, you know, other jobs you get paid 8 cents an hour, which basically equates to $10 to $12 a month, roughly. And if you owe restitution, they're taking half of that. So realistically, you have people who are making $5 a month, $6 a month. And so when you shop at the store with $6 a month, the only thing you can buy is a couple of top ramens. You're probably gonna get like 10 to 12 top ramens, and that's it, which we know is sodium infused and everything like that. And so this is why, like, I encourage people, like, if you have loved ones in prison, you know, support them because they need it. And I would just share once again an I statement and taking accountability. Something else that I had to reconcile was early in my incarceration, I sold drugs. You know, I didn't sell drugs when I was in society, but when I came to prison, I learned real quick that this is what I had to do to survive. That was my permission statement because once again, my family was coming from poverty. I'm not going to ask my mom for money when, you know, I have three younger siblings that she has to take care of. And so my permission statement was, hey, I'm going to sell some drugs, you know. And at the time, you know, I didn't care about, you know, this person is taking money away from their family. I didn't care about this person. I'm adding to this person's addiction, which ultimately could lead to his overdose or anything like that. The only thing I cared about was getting this $50, $100 so I could put money on my books. I can go to the store, I can get a package or something like that. And so, but this is what the system is really designed to do. And I really believe that like lawmakers should actually look into this to say, give these guys a living wages. You know, nobody's saying to give them minimum wage because who in prison is going to be able to utilize all that money anyway? But to have a fair living wage for means of being in prison, I don't see anything wrong with that. And I believe that that would actually lower crime, you know, on a greater scale. But I would say for me, like just the food, it was horrible. Like, I mean, I can't, you know, justify anything. Like there was no good days. No, not even chicken on the bone, which is widely popular in prison. That they don't even give that anymore. Now it's like a chicken butt. Sydney, you know what I'm talking about? They stopped the chicken on the bone.
Yes.
Now they get the little puck.
Yes.
That is,
Yes.
yeah. So I mean, I can't
Mystery meat.
justify any. Yeah, it's mystery meat. I can't justify any of that stuff. Like it's horrible. And like the food that they give you at the store, you know, it's just sodium infused. There's chips. You know, I mean, dehydrated beans and rice and it's not good, you know what I mean? And so they definitely have to change that as well too. So
Thank you.
Yes.
Looks like Dana has a question.
I got a little distracted when Kent asked about the food. Let me see, where are we? Okay, there we are. Hi Brandon. Hey Sydney. Uh,
Hello.
I
Hey, how you
worked
doing?
with hey there. I worked with formerly incarcerated women at Homeboy Industries, and I noticed that they used to tote around those cup of noodles. And so when the doctor asked you, was it the soups? Was he talking about cup of noodles?
Yeah, but any soup, cup of noodles, top ramen, it's all sodium
Oh,
infused. And I remember one time I looked at the directions on the back. Actually, one soup pack is supposed to be for 2 people. And I mean, guys are eating 2 or 3 soups at a time. And I'm just like, that wasn't never my thing. Because soup, I can't even, it'll make me throw up right now, even talking about it right now. But yeah,
1,600
yeah,
milligrams of sodium.
man, too much sodium. Yeah, it's horrible.
okay. I was just clarifying that. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right.
Well, I got another question. What was your favoriteest thing about being incarcerated?
You said my favorite what?
Favoriteest thing about being incarcerated? When I was in,
Favoriteest thing.
for
Okay.
me,
So,
we had a great bakery. They actually
mhm,
had you could get your baker's license, and when you left, you could go to a bakery and get a job being a baker. So our
yeah,
bakery was the best. Was pretty.
yeah. So I would say for me, there was actually, one thing that we learn is, and we teach in a Compassion Prison Project is resilience, resiliency and like having that in your toolbox. And, one thing you learn about being resilient is making the best out of a bad situation. And so while I was in prison, there was a lot of traditions. One of them that resonated with me was Christmas. Uh, for everything Thanksgiving was not for me in prison, Christmas was, because Thanksgiving that was always the worst. But Christmas, it was always somehow, some way, I made it into like a good day. Obviously, I'm a Lakers fan, so Lakers played on Christmas. I would always watch Home Alone. Like that was kind of like my tradition. Like Christmas Eve, ABC, they would always show Home Alone, which is my favorite Christmas movie. I would watch that. In the morning, I would probably start cooking. I shower, I'll start making like my meal. Afternoon, it would be the Laker game. And then, at nighttime, I would just be in the day room with the fellas, we'll be sharing food and just having conversation. And it was a really like a good time of fellowship. And something that started happening at Lancaster before I paroled was the CRM there, Miss Lake, she did, it's called Christmas caroling. So you have different organizations, they all come together and they go into the prison and go building to building, singing Christmas carols, passing out like hot chocolate and pastries and stuff like that. And it's just like a whole party celebration. So last year I was on the inside team and I was serving. This year for Christmas, I actually went back into the prison. So that was my first time going back. Like after 2 weeks of being released, I was already back inside prison doing the Christmas Carol thing. And so that was pretty special. Yeah.
So Brendan, is there anything more about in your story, that you want to share with us, a little bit more about what it was like or what it's like now that, you
Yeah.
leave us with?
So yeah, so I would just say, like for me, I was always intentional. And what I mean by that, like I was intentional about everything I did, like relationships that I had. If you see Laura, Miss Laura Campos, there's my fiance, she was with me, for a majority of that time when I was incarcerated, like as my support system, and I'm truly thankful for that. But just really just being intentional. I remember like I paroled from Lancaster, a facility, and they have the dog program there. And I love dogs, don't get me wrong. But guys would be like, "Hey, are you going to be in the dog program?" I said, "No, I'm not going to be in the dog program." And they didn't understand it. It was like, "Why? We meet all these celebrities, we have all these events." And I said, "Because I'm not going to be a dog trainer when I get out of prison." Then you had guys, they work HFM, which is like health facility maintenance. So they clean up the hospital settings and stuff. And, you make like $1 an hour. It's a PIA paying number. And so guys asked me, did I want that job? And I said, no. And they said, why? I said, because I'm not going to be a janitor when I get out of prison. So everything that I did, I was intentional. Like my first priority was always like the chapel. I'm a believer. So first and foremost came my relationship with God, because I knew like what I experienced, he got me through it, period. So I have to dedicate my life to him. So that was my first priority. So anything dealing with chapel, I was always there. And so now that I'm out, I intern with Testimony Ministries. I mentioned Jared Keefe, that's my mentor. You know, that's someone I met when I was in prison, and now I have a great relationship with him now that I'm outside of prison. My second priority was my education. You know, I received multiple AAs, one in sociology, one in communications through Antelope Valley College and Coastline. And now I'm out as I'm doing this Zoom meeting. I'm literally right here on campus at Cal State LA, you know, because education, that's still important for me. And then third would be like the self-help component. I've participated in over 50 self-help classes, and that's was my relationship with Compassion Prison Project came in to be. I facilitated when I was inside. I ran 6 cohorts of trauma talks, you know, when I was incarcerated, and now I'm out facilitating trauma talks in the community. And just to sum that up, there was 52 people in 12 from 12 countries in 15 different states on that Zoom, including Tracy, you know, and Laura was also there as well too. So it's just been phenomenal. And like I said, I can't say anything like about prison and try to glamorize it because it's nothing to glamorize. But I would also be remiss to say is like, you know I would not be the person I am right now today if it wasn't for that experience, you know. And I would be lying. I would be fake if I said anything other than that, because that's the reality. You know.
Mark's
What
had his
is-
hand up for a while.
So what brick walls are you running into now in trying to return to civilization? And how
So,
can
you know,
with that?
So once again, I would just say for myself, like I don't want to be big headed or anything, but I think my reintegration has been successful because once again I was intentional. Everything that I did when I was in prison, it transitioned to now that I'm out of transition. And so now it's really just about me being of service. You know, we talk about what does it mean to network with people? Like networking isn't what can I get from you, it's how can I be of service to you, you know. And it's that's how you build community. So when Tracy asked me to come here, it was a pleasure because at the end of the day, I just want to be of service. I want people who have not been to prison, who want to be involved in prison reform, not to feel like that they're doing this work in vain, to really feel like, hey, I am making a difference. This works, because that's really important. And so, you know, as far as like my reintegration personally, I haven't had any problems. I'm in college, I'm employed, you know, I got a car, you know what I mean? Like, you know, I'm working on houses right now. I'm in transitional houses. So, you know, more importantly, what I look for and what, you know, I could receive from you is friendship. You know what I mean? Relationship. You know what I mean? Just making yourself available. You can find me on Instagram. You can email me, whatever, and just stay in touch, stay in contact, because who knows? You know, that day might come where I will need you, or that day might come where I could be of service to you. But for me, more importantly, it's just really about making that connection with society, with humanity, because that's the only thing that I strive for. And I just pray that society strives for the same thing, because we need some healing. We have a lot of healing to do.
Tony.
Yeah, but Brandon, what got you to be intentional? Were you intentional when you were there at 18?
No, so no, not at all. Not a chance. So what really got me intentional was education. And so I will just share like another story. My best friend since I've been home is Mr. Edwin Cruz. He also works for Compassion Prison Project as well. I always say that's like we're like ebony and ivory, like that's my guy. But I would just tell the story of like how, you know, I first built a relationship with him when we were on B facility at Lancaster, which is a level 4 270. And he was a college clerk. And he would always come to my door. He was looking for my cellmate at the time who was enrolled in college. And he would always say, "Hey, man, do you have your college work?" And he would always, my cellie was, "No, come back tomorrow." And I'll be damned if Edwin didn't come back tomorrow. And then he would have the same excuse, "I'll come back on Friday." And I'll be damned if Edwin didn't come back on Friday. And that really like planted the seed to say, man, if this man is so adamant and serious about another man's education, maybe I need to be enrolled in college. Maybe I need to be serious about my own education. And so I had the opportunity to go to a facility after that. And I met Edwin on a facility right then and there. We started talking, boom, we just hit it off. And so then eventually I enrolled in college. You know, I received multiple AAs. And, you know, when I was there, I began to see a brighter future for myself. So it wasn't so much about fighting or working to try to go home, because I had no doubt in my mind I was going home. So then it began to be like, what am I going to do when I get home? And once that seed was planted in my mind, that's really where, you know, I began to be intentional about, you know, my future.
Okay. Thank you.
Sydney?
Yes, my button is not working. Brandon,
Okay.
blessings to you, my brother, for your safe return and a soft landing. You know,
Yeah.
it's an African proverb that says, a child that's not unleashed by the village will burn that village. Stand you wholeheartedly because I am you. We come from the beginnings and the same topics of traumas. Out of the traumas, adverse childhood experience, I too have 10 ACEs. You know, and mine started at a very early age, at age 5 years old. You know, for me, you know, you were asked what was the best thing that happened to you while you were in prison. Uh, for me, that question, it resonates to awareness. I got a chance to find myself. You know, and so I understand you in that regard. And I understand how education transforms you. You know, coming from the inner city ghettos of San Bernardino, I was told I'm not going to be anything. I'm not going to amount to nothing, and I didn't even try. And when I got to Donovan State Prison, I started taking college classes in 2018. And when they set these 3 college curriculums on the desk, it looked like a mountain like Kilimanjaro. And for a man that hadn't been to school since 1981, I said to myself immediately, I can't do this. But a brother spoke to me. He said, brother, if you got a 3-unit class, dedicate 2 hours times that 2 times whatever many units that you have to the study. So if you got a 3-unit class, 2 times 3 is what? I said 6. He says, I said 6. He says 6 hours of study per week will get you a passing grade. And I started doing that. And I started getting A's after A's after A's. And by the grace of God, you look at an old man that graduated with honors and a 3.96 GPA. You know, I didn't know I was smart, Brandon. I did not know I was smart. I knew I was slick. Okay? But people said, I always knew you were smart. You were always smart. But the key thing of that was I did not know I was smart. And 2, where would I be had I had known? You know what I mean? So I understand you wholeheartedly, and I understand the EGOT thing as well, you know. What, you know, right now I'm working with an organization called Life is Leaving a Legacy. And it's about helping at-risk, not at-risk, because the term is no longer at-risk youth. It's at-promise youth, you know, to help develop them socially and community-wise. You know, what are you doing today to give back? Because I am a giver as well, to give back to the communities, to help the youth see that poor decisions that people like you and I have made way back then can haunt you 20, 30 years from now. So how are you engaged to develop their young minds and making sure that they too are now intentional at a young age versus being intentional after the fact?
So that's actually, well, first and foremost, thank you for sharing all of that, because I second everything that you're saying, because that's really what it's all about in Compassion Prison Project. The main focus is awareness. Like, we believe that that's the most important thing throughout this whole process is awareness, and also getting back to our true nature, our true essence, because all of these things that we're doing now, it was already in us. That's why I shared when I started off talking about drama club and like why I regretted it so much, because in my heart, that's what I've always wanted to do. And now I'm doing it. But just to answer your question about, you know, giving back to the youth, when I was incarcerated, I was also a member of CROP, which is convicts reaching out to people. It was like a youth diversion program, and we partnered with LAPD and also the LA County Sheriff's Department, and they would bring in, promising youth, and they would bring them in, and it wasn't like a scared straight like in your face. It was more of like a mentorship where we would have conversations with them. We would have to put together like lectures or speeches, if you will. Sometimes we'll do like plays and prompts and things of that nature. And so just being able to connect with them and give back to them on that capacity. But also, I do that now, right now, today. So my mentorship with youth is literally just personal, one-on-one. It's not dealing with any organization. It's just me being myself. So when I pull up, I go to Prison Way, and when I go there, there's always a lot of youth that are getting out of juvenile halls or camp, and I talk to them. And once I talk to them, I'm able to relate with them and resonate with them because I share my experience of juvenile incarceration, and I just assure them that there's something better, and so the first thing that they think is like, there's nobody that has their back. There's nobody there that supports them. And I can understand how they see it because that's how I saw it when I was their age. So I assure them, I say, yeah, there's people that are against you. There probably is even a system put in place that's designed that wants to send you to prison. But I said, but on the flip side, there are people that are for you and people that want to see you succeed. And I'm one of those people, and so just going back to like, I don't know if you're aware, but like about a month ago, they did an investigation, and where like 30 probation officers were like arrested because they were doing gladiator fights in Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. And so that was something that re-traumatized me and triggered me because when I was in juvenile hall 30 years, that same thing was happening 30 years ago when I was in there. Staff literally broke my arm. And, when they talk to the media, the first thing they'll say is that, hey, these kids are gang members and this is what they want. The kids they're fighting are their rival gang members. And I'm just like, no, like you're painting a way different picture than what the reality is. Because when I was in there, yeah, at the time I was a gang member, but I was still a scared 14-year-old, like I wasn't like that tough. But when I go into the unit, the staff is telling me, hey man, you got a couple enemies in here. You're gonna have a few fights, and then they'll pop these guys' doors, and now you're out here fighting in the day room. And if you get the better end of the fight, then the staff, they want to come grab your arm, twist your arm. They dislocated my shoulder. And so one of the youth that I mentor, he like actually called me. Usually this is when I knew something was wrong because he doesn't really call. He just likes to text all the time. He'll text me and let me know, okay, man, I just took my driver's test today. I got my license. I'm happy, or, things like that. And we'll check in, and every like once a week, I'll probably meet up with him. But this day he called me, which I found that pretty odd. And like when he called me, he's crying. He's like literally crying, and he's telling me that this stuff happened to him as well too, and nobody ever believed him. And so he was just like, I'm the only person that actually believed him, and the only reason why I believed him was because I experienced it myself too. So I believe that youth mentorship is absolutely paramount, in this whole reconciliation that we're talking about here, because and that also goes back to like politicians and lawmakers changing laws, because I had a conversation with somebody this morning, just talking about, this lock them up and throw away the key. So, but what you're not factoring is that that person that you sent to prison for 25 years and you're telling him he's never getting out, he has kids, he has younger siblings, he has a whole community that looks up to him. Like me, the neighborhood I was from, I have 3 guys under me that have my name, and they're looking up to me like, oh yeah, that's the big homie so-and-so. And if I'm doing something negative, guess what? They're going to try to outdo me. So now, not only do you have a vicious cycle of trauma, it's going to get worse. It's not getting better. It's going to get worse because the guys younger than me that are looking up to me, they're going to want to do worse than me in order to receive my approval. But now if I've changed my life and I'm out here in society and I'm going back to the community and I'm telling these kids that, hey man, there's something better that you could be doing with your life. Now I'm a part of the solution and no longer a part of the problem.
Thank you. And we're coming up on our 1 hour, and Neil has his hand up. Thank you.
Well, for one thing, I wanted to get your email. Is that something you would announce
Yes.
or put?
Yep. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'll put that in the chat. I'll put all the information. You can send me
Thank
an
you.
email. You can look me up on Instagram, and I'm open to, you know, the community. Man, I'm here for all of you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just want to say you're marvelous. You're really inspirational. I appreciate it. And I want to thank, you know, I know Shevin came and, you know, some people, they're up to big things. I know a number of people have been incarcerated on this call. There's more than 2. I know that. And just thank you for the inspiration. And I just wanted to know if any, I know we don't have much time, but if anybody else who was formerly incarcerated want to say what they're up to, or else what you would recommend, you know, because it is tough out here. I mean, you know, it's not that easy. You sound like things are really going well for you, you know, but it's because it's still pretty new. But what would you say for guys that, you know, struggling out here?
Yeah. And so and that goes back to my initial point. Like I said, I speak from my experience, but I also speak for the voiceless. And like I said, the main thing that people struggle with that I see is that shame that comes with I'm formerly incarcerated. You know what I mean? Or like going to get that job interview and receiving the job only to get a call a couple of weeks later to say, hey, we did a investigation on you and we have to terminate your services. You know, because like now on the application, they can't put, have you been convicted of a felony? But once they hire you, they can go do their research. And once they find out that you've been to prison, they could terminate your service. So that's another issue. You know, housing, you know, certain things that like certain places, they won't allow you to move in because you're formerly incarcerated. But I don't want to preach a victim mindset. I don't want to preach that, you know, doom and gloom, because when people hear that, the only thing they're going to think is, I'm better off staying in prison. At least I got 3 hots in the cot. Or I could just go back to committing crime because I don't have to worry about receiving a handout that's not coming. I don't really have the patience because not everybody has really done that kind of work. The only thing I will say is that there is help available out there. And this is why we have this community. So if you reach out to me and you say, hey, Brandon, I got a guy who's formerly incarcerated and he needs housing. And I could say, hey, I have a case manager, tell him to look up Titanium Healthcare. They actually work with people to ensure that they have housing, they make the down payment, and they pay the first month rent. And then after that, they're kind of on their own. Or if they need jobs, these places are you know, giving stipends. Tell them to take an internship here. I'm with Designing Creative Futures. So there's a lot of resources that are available out there. If he just wants support, tell him to go to Prison Way. If he wants to build a community, tell him he can do trauma talks in the community. So there's a lot of resources that are available. It's not just one way. It's not a narrow path. It's broad. It's holistic. But nobody's going to do it on their own. We're going to do it together. So, but yeah, reach out to me. You know, any way I can help. I have a lot of resources. So you reach out to me. We'll take it from there.
Thank you, Brandon.
I will do that.
Yeah.
And we're gonna after we close, we'll leave the meeting
Judy has
open
her
for a
hand.
bit.
Sorry, Robert. Judy has her hand up.
Oh,
Yeah, thank you. I can't figure out how to do it on my phone. So I was with Compassion Prison Project today, and they send their love to you. And I wanted to share, and we're here at Ironwood, and there were 75 guys in the course today, and they were phenomenal. And I just wanted to share 2 things that 2 brilliant attendees shared with us. And the first thing was that what we're out to do is transform apathy into empathy. And I thought that was just absolutely brilliant. You know, like out here, people are apathetic, or just to, you know, to have the empathy for the incarcerated people, for the people who are in reentry. I love that. And then the second thing is, one guy was talking about trauma, and he said, you know, when you have trauma, there's only 2 things you can do with it. You can transfer it to somebody else, or you can transform it into something powerful and good. And so I just wanted to share that with you, see if you had any comments on those thoughts.
Yeah, that's, I mean, there's really nothing else to say about that. I've actually heard that saying that with trauma, there's only 2 things you can do. You can either transform it or transfer it. And I just believe that that's powerful. That's well said. And I don't think there's anything that needs to be added to that. You know, transferring apathy to empathy. Yeah, absolutely. But it comes
Loved it.
from
Thank you.
awareness. It comes from awareness. So what's happening in that workshop? Guys are receiving awareness, and that's powerful.
And then it comes from
Thank
choice
you. Mm. Mm.
too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, powerful.
You know, the one thing
And
that
sorry for the sunglasses. I'm looking at the sun here. So.
the one thing that I understand about trauma, and the most beautiful part about it, you know, if there is any beauty into it, is telling my story. And as long as we keep telling our stories is going to be the key to allow someone else to be unlocked from their prison. So that is the beauty of it.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
All righty. We're gonna at the end of the meeting, we'll keep the Zoom call open so we can kind of have a meeting after the meeting for folks that didn't get a chance to share or want to share off the recording. Hey, Tracy, thank you for having Brendan tell his story. Brendan, thank you for who you are. You know, congratulations on this second chance, right? And being an inspiration and a role model and a mentor and being servant hearted is what I'm present to who you are, that and that love you are for the community. I just want to remind everyone that the recording will be on our website, and we'll turn that here shortly. Come visit https www.prisons2partnerships.org and sign up for our newsletter so that you can stay apprised of our next community gathering, which will be on the 12th of May at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And again, a reminder that our national conference will be on Saturday, November 22nd. So save the date for that.
Did you mean
And-
Robert,
5
and
p.m.?
the speaker,
5 p.m.
5 p.m. Pacific.
5 p.m.
Oh,
Pacific,
excuse me,
and Robert, the
5
the
p.m.
speaker, sorry, the speaker next month is Sydney, who's on the call right now.
Excellent.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
And thank you for that correction. And thank you all for who is here sharing, being in the sharing of this. This space doesn't exist without you all, and we'll see you next month.